I had a life-changing event when I was investigated by the GMC, and it made me think that if I lost my job as a GP, how would I survive? And then I started to really analyse who we are as individuals when we work in the NHS, how we are so reliant on somebody else, that being the NHS, so that you've got a job and you can pay your mortgage. But what happens if that stops? You're in big trouble. And that's like a one-legged stool. If you take the leg off that stool, then your ass is on the floor.
Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for accepting my invitation. And it wasn't easy to arrange this chat with you, as you're a very, very busy man. You're a GP and property investor, but could you introduce yourself and tell more about all the things that keep you occupied these days?
Oh, wow, okay. Well, thanks for asking me on, and thanks for your patience. So I'm a GP. Went to medical school at Barts in London, did a surgical training, then ended up going into general practice when something called MTAS happened, Medical Training and Application Service, and that collapsed eventually, but it was too late then. I was already in general practice, and then since then I've seen I've had a few things that have happened that we'll touch on, I'm sure, but nowadays I'm leaving general practice very soon, very, very soon. I have a few property businesses that do various different things, from the region's only completely accessible holiday homes for people in wheelchairs or on ventilators so their family can bring their cared for relative and have a bit of respite. All the way through to big developments, refurbishments. We operate very luxury short-term holiday rentals. We also do, like I say, we've got developments. I'm in the middle of buying a hotel. I've got two businesses that I'm currently acquiring that should complete in May, first week in May, hopefully. One's a physiotherapy business, one's a heavy goods vehicle business. And we've got quite a few different things actually going on, but I think that's probably enough for starters.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. And I remember you were saying in one of your podcasts, for those who...
I've got podcasts that keep you busy as well.
Yeah, so for those interested in property investment, it might be a good source of information. So in one of your podcasts, you mentioned that you are sitting on three-legged chair. Or stool, yes. Three-legged stool.
Three legs are better than one.
Yeah, so it sounds like, all those additional streams of work and income are kind of related to your approach to this concept of diversification. So could you tell a bit more how it works, being on this three-legged stool?
Yeah, so it's quite simple, really. I had a life-changing event when I was investigated by the GMC, and it made me think that if I lost my job as a GP, how would I survive? And then I started to really analyse who we are as individuals when we work in the NHS, how we are so reliant on somebody else, that being the NHS or the managers. And it's the same in any job, I suppose. You're reliant on your managers or the person that owns the business to keep that business going so that you've got a job and you can pay your mortgage. But what happens if that stops? You're in big trouble. So it made me really look at that, and that's like a one-legged stool. If you take the leg off that stool, then your ass is on the floor. So then I started thinking about how to mitigate that. And that's when this whole entrepreneurship journey, I hate the word journey, but this whole road that I'm on started to happen. And it's been about 10 years in the making, but essentially I look for multiple streams of income within everything that I'm doing. So within property, We might have a stream of income from buy-to-let properties. We might have a stream of income from serviced accommodation, which is like your Airbnb type stuff. We might have a stream of income from the disabled or the accessible holiday properties. We might have a stream of income from doing flips. We might have a stream of income from the guest houses that we own and the hotel. So if one of those legs fails, they're all being propped up by the other thing, and that's just within property. And then as you progress throughout along the road, as you go down the road, you see other opportunities that open up. And the one that I'm into at the minute is having a portfolio of businesses, not necessarily within the same sector, because trucking and physiotherapy do not kind of complement each other, but within the portfolio of businesses that we're acquiring, each one will be separate and stand on its own. So the group has multiple streams of income on its own, and if one of them starts to fail, the others can be propped up.
Obviously, GMC is the thing that every doctor is dreading. How did it impact you, personally, being investigated by them? It
was the most harrowing, difficult 18 months of my entire life, if I'm honest with you. I got referred to the GMC by a Part 2 doctor because I did a cremation form over Christmas and he hadn't turned up for a week. The funeral director asked me to do the Part 2. It was a straightforward death, end-of-life death in a care home on the end-of-life pathway. There was nothing to it. I rang the Part 1 doctor to confirm everything. It was in the Christmas party, and I was in there doing a Part 1 of my own patients. So I agreed to do it because it was so straightforward, got back to the practice, and then at the end of surgery that day I rang the Part 1 doctor, who said, the Part 2 doctor is absolutely furious. So I said, okay. So I rang the Part 2 doctor and said, I hear that you're not very happy, and he started accusing me of stealing cremation forms for the 50 quid, which I'd already told the funeral director that I didn't want any money because I didn't really take any money from doing crem forms. He said, if it's if it's like crossed wires, then fair enough. So I said, okay. I thought nothing more of it. Christmas came and went, and then in the new year I got a letter from the GMC saying that the Part 2 doctor, who hadn't turned up for a week to do his Part 2, had referred me to the GMC for inappropriately signing cremation forms. And then 18 months of abject misery later, had my colleagues interviewed, had all my previous cremation forms pulled and investigated. I had my bank statements pulled by the GMC to see how many 50 quids I was earning doing cremation forms, hoping that they were getting the next Harold Shipman. It was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. And then 18 months later, I'd lost about 3 stone in weight. The MDU said to me, people do get struck off for things like this. And that's when it really hit that actually I'm a GP, I earn reasonably good money, or I thought it was reasonably good at the time. What happens if I lose my job? And I started scouring the job adverts for, being a labourer on building sites or trying to learn a new skill, because if you everybody tells you as a doctor you could move your job, you'd be so highly in demand. But when you actually start looking into it, that's not the case at all. You've got no chance of getting any other job on equivalent salary. You could probably get other jobs, but you'd be starting at the bottom again. And why wouldn't you? You've got no experience in any other sector. So it was a sharp reality, and that's what kicked the whole thing off. And then in the end, the GMC said to me, we can't find any evidence that you've done anything wrong, apart from the fact that you admitted signing this form without speaking to the Part 2 and the Part 1 doctor first, because it was Christmas and they wouldn't answer the phone. I said, that's correct. That's exactly what happened. Right. Okay, so you've got 2 choices. We can either put a warning on your GMC status for 5 years that the whole world can see on the GMC register, or we can take you to a full MTPS tribunal where there will be 2 outcomes. One outcome, you'll get away with, and there'll be an unblemished record, or you'll get struck off. Okay. And after 18 months of, significant depression, I just couldn't face doing it. I could not face going to an MTPS tribunal and the cost and all the rest of it. So I took the warning. And that was the day that I fell out of love with with medicine and the NHS. And ever since then, I think that was 2011, ever since then, my life has been completely different.
So the journey took like 2011, you said. So you started looking for outside ways many years ago. So where are you now with Corner Plot Properties, which is your business related to properties? Well,
Corner Plot's the main one that we that I kind of like. If you look for me on Instagram, I'm Corner Plot Properties. At the minute, we've got a big portfolio of very well cash flowing properties. We've currently got 4. I'm lying. We've currently got 4 big developments on the go at any one time. I've got a full team of people that work for me. That's why I can do this up to this morning, whilst the lads are putting a new story on a project that we've just taken the roof off. So Corner Plot does that, and then we've got Liberty Stays, which is the accessible properties. We've got the second one of those in development at the moment. That's probably the most rewarding of all the things that I do, because you get people going on holiday in wheelchairs, or families with kids that are hoisted everywhere, that have never been able to go on a holiday ever, and then they can find somewhere luxury like ours, and they can. So downstairs is fully accessible for the person that's got the mobility issues. They don't have to be in a wheelchair. You could be your elderly relatives with Zimmer frames, but they can. If you try and find somewhere that's truly accessible to go on holiday, I think there's 11 in the country, and one of them's ours, compared to hundreds of thousands of Airbnbs. So they might say they're accessible, but you've still got 5 steps to get into most of them, and the doorways are short and all the rest of it. Whereas this is truly accessible and it's luxury. There's no social services grab bars in any of our properties. They're all really swanky. So that's really really rewarding, and it's kind of using out my medical knowledge to give something back a little bit. So we've got Liberty Stays, and then I've got a very exciting property company called Over 40 and Thriving with one of my business partners, and we've got about 1.5 million quid worth of property. We've currently got 600 grand worth of property in it, and another 1.5 million in the pipeline to go into it in Q1 this year. And then we've got Coalescence, which is my holding company, which is for the businesses. So it comes, when I look back 10 years ago to where I am now, I never, ever thought I'd be doing what I'm doing.
I think you need a list of your own of your own companies.
Well, I've got quite a few actually.
I'm getting kind of confused. So going back to your main one, to Corner Plot Properties, I've been following you on LinkedIn, and what I liked, that you share the journey. So you're very open and transparent in showing up. How you're working on the building side yourself. You actually getting your hands dirty. So I really liked it. But obviously you, from background, you're a doctor. And the question I have here, there's so many doctors now looking way out of NHS for various reasons. And when I speak to some doctors or follow them, there's always this chat about transferable skills, and I'm not entirely that convinced, because people are pumping it as you, as a doctor, you have those skills, as everyone will take it. Could you tell me, what's your opinion on it? How much any of your medical skills actually were helpful in you developing those outside medicine businesses, and how much was it a kind of an obstacles?
Yeah, very few of the true core medical skills actually transfer. What does transfer is so when you're a partner in a practice and you run a practice, and you're used to putting teams together personally, I take a very active involvement in our books and our accounts and the business plan. A lot of doctors have no interest. Certainly a lot of partners have literally zero interest in that, and most of my partners have no interest in it either. But in every partnership there should be at least one person, and I'm that person. So that kind of skill set is transferable. Dealing with tradesmen, running your own team of tradesmen, is very much different to running a general practice, where people are kind of held to high ethical standards and all the rest of it, whereas on a building site, ethical standards can go out of the window sometimes. Sometimes it's more like running a creche than running a building site. You've probably got more transferable skills as a nursery or a junior primary school teacher than you will have as a doctor trying to put a build team together. But yeah, the business running side of things from being a GP partner is actually quite useful. And that's the main thing that I've transferred across.
And what is your experience of working with tradesmen? As my own limited experience is pretty much along the picture painted in that popular TV show, Cowboy Builders.
Well, my lads all turn up on horses every day. So no, it's there's cowboy builders out there, but my lads work for me, so they are, if I don't like what they've done, they redo it. Equally, they've been with us long enough now that they know how we like stuff doing. So it's your cowboy builders tend to be the ones that are working for themselves, trying to do one job, and then they'll get another job in that's too much money to turn down, and they've got two on the go and they can't do them both. So one, it gets finished in a bad way, so they can jump onto the next. Or that's the problem with tradesmen. They all think that there'll be no work after this job, so they'll take on as many jobs as possible, spread themselves too thin, and then none of the jobs get finished properly. And that's when the reputation starts to disappear. But with my lads, they get paid every week. They turn up, they do the work until it's right. Now that has its own challenges, because if you've got a builder to come in and do something on a price, they're motivated to finish it on a certain timescale. Whereas my lads get paid by the week if it's finished or not, to a certain extent. And so you have to have very tight control over your schedule of works and your build timeline to make sure that things are hitting the milestones. And that in itself is a very challenging thing to do, because if a property isn't being rented one way or another, either by buy-to-let tenants or by short-term tenants, if it's not being rented, it's not making money. And if it's not making money, it's costing you money somewhere, whether it's in mortgage payments or investor payments or build team payments for their wages. So it needs to perform, otherwise it's lost money. So you've got to have a very tight control over that.
Can you tell a bit about how the property adventure actually started? How was that your first property deal?
The first one was a very small 3-bed terraced house in Darlington. We wanted to see whether we had what it took to be involved in the game in property, whether what we thought would happen, whether it actually worked. And I wanted to know how long stuff took, how much things cost. So we took on a small 3-bed terraced house in Darlington that was on the market for 60,000. We picked it up for 47, I think. Numbers might be shaky because it's a while ago, but I think it was about 47,000 we ended up buying it for. I did the full refurbishment on it on my own with no contractors. Well, me and my father-in-law did it. And then we got it refinanced. It turned into a lovely little house. We got it refinanced, and when the valuer came, he gave it a value of 75,000. So we'd increased the value from 47 to 75, and I think I'd spent about 15,000 on it. So I was all in for 57, 63. something like that. We've got a 75% mortgage at its new value, which released 53,000 back out again. So I'd left in, I don't know, 10 grand there or thereabouts. And with that money, then we moved on to the next one. And so it was at that point that we realised that actually this does work. And I now understand how much things cost and how long things take. So slowly but surely after that, you start doing your next one and you start doing your next one. And then you get comfortable doing it. So then you start doing 2 at the same time. And then you start doing 3 at the same time. And eventually you stretch yourself to the point where you're much more able and capable than you were when you started.
How big is your portfolio now in terms of properties?
Actually, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. We bought 5 in December. We've got in the pipeline at the minute. We've probably got another 30 in this beginning of this year. I'm not sure. There's about 10 or 15 of them that might not happen, but we're looking closely at them. In terms of definite bedrooms that were coming to the market, we've got 48 bedrooms coming to the market across various properties in Q1. Well, we're most of the way through Q1 now, so it might end up actually into the middle of Q2. But it's not. This is something that a lot of people ask, actually. How many properties have you got? It's not about the amount of properties you've got. It's about how much cash flow each one generates. So we've got one property that generates fantastic cash flow, many more than 10 buy-to-lets would generate. So it's all about the quality, not the quantity. And there's different what's the word I'm looking for? Different strategies and different things suit different people better. If you want to slowly build wealth and accumulate a massive amount of units, then that's one thing, and you'd buy 1 billion buy-to-lets. But if you want cash flow that can change your life, then you need income. And income and number of units don't necessarily correlate.
That's interesting. And looking how you working in properties area, what actually excites you the most when you're dealing with houses, buildings, and so on?
What excites me the most? I mean, I could say the money, but that's not the case. The money is not the thing. What excites me the most is being able to take the worst house on the best street and then make it the best house in that street and the most valuable one. So we tend to do that. That's our typical modus operandi. We find the most run-down property in niche locations, extend them by adding floors above, extend them out the back and the side, and force the value up, finish them to an ultra-high standard inside, and then we get them valued, and they're usually above the ceiling price for the street, and that excites me a lot. The demolition part of it really excites me too. That's quite cool. Being on site with the lads and the banter, that's like the best part of my life is when I'm doing that. But what really excites me the most in life is growth. It's about the challenge of and the chase every day, rather than it being about achieving a particular goal. Because you get to a goal and then you think, well, what's next? And a lot of people, if they achieve anything big in their life, you'll quite often hear stories like Olympic gold medalists, once they've won Olympic gold, then they get depressed because they've achieved it. Whereas for me, it's more about every year I write my goals down, and they're all designed to stretch me from the previous year. So, if having 3 developments on the go at one time is really difficult, especially when you've just started. So if you get comfortable doing that, I want to do 4 at any one time. So anything to keep me in the discomfort zone and keep me growing as a person, that's what excites me the most about life.
Unlike states where this is pretty popular, I think, among doctors. There's a lot of property investors, among doctors. I don't think so. It's really that popular in UK. So for someone interested in following in your footsteps, what tips would you offer to an aspiring property investor?
Get started. That old cliche that the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, and the next best time to plant a tree is today. Warren Buffett says someone is sitting in the shade today because of the tree they planted years ago, and that's the truth. You've got to get going. If a lot of doctors, I find, are incredibly risk averse. So if you're risk averse, you'll spend a lot of time spinning your wheels and not getting very far. You've got to take a risk at some point. You've got to put your feet in the water and feel the temperature of the water and decide whether it's too hot or too cold for you. But ultimately, there's a big difference between thinking about something and doing it. And in that gap between thinking and doing, many people fall down. So you've just got to do it. Find something, put your money into it, have a go at it, take the risk, see if you like it. Roughly 1% of all property landlords or property owners own more than one property. So, sorry, I might be lying. That might be 5%. 5% of property owners own more than one property. Only 1% of property owners own more than 3. And there's a reason for that. It's because a lot of people try and buy one and think it's good, and then they realise just how difficult it is, and then they don't want to buy anymore. And especially when you start looking at the money that you put into them, and then the rent that you might get, and then you've got your maintenance costs and all the rest of it. If you're getting 6% on your money as a newbie to property, you'll be doing very well. Which is why people invest with us at 10%, because they don't have to do the work, but we've got the margin. But it is what it is. You know, it's if you want to do it, for the people that are keen and motivated and driven and have reached the pain point in their life where they can no longer continue in medicine and they see property as an outlet, throw your heart and soul into it. Because if you do what you did to become the doctor or the GP or the consultant or whatever that you are at the minute, if you would transfer that to it, you'll be successful. But it depends on what stage of your life you're at. So it's doable. It's not rocket science, but it's a lot of hard work to start with.
Yeah, that's good tip. You know, just make this first step and then show up and then try something.
Yeah, and it gets really difficult and really boring, and it's the consistency of effort over time. You know, property takes so long. Nothing moves very quickly at all, and you've got to keep showing up every day, just believing and having almost blind faith that it will work out, and eventually it starts to snowball. But there's a lag between starting and seeing results, and that lag can be a long time, years. And you've got to stay consistent every day, doing something to start seeing the snowball move. And when it moves, it's quite a nice feeling.
There's never a quick fix and then way of earning money quickly. But I think, for many doctors, we are very risk averse, and there's a lot of other, kind of misconceptions, and money are taboo, especially, when you're working in NHS. This is not something that people feel kind of, embarrassed or guilty when talking about money. Would you agree that as doctors, we are kind of, pre-trained this way, that kind of, I don't know how to say that, it kind of hinders,
reserved,
Yeah,
we are very reserved. It's a cultural thing, really. But once you start getting into the outside world, outside of medicine, you realise that the people that are successful talk about money all the time in a frank and open manner. In our business, we're an open book. It's not arrogance. People might hear me throwing terms around like we have X amount of money in one business or property in one business. That's not arrogance. It's just a statement of fact. It's not designed in any way just to explain, what's what at a certain time. But it's something in medicine that is a cultural thing, that when you move outside of it, the culture is different, especially once you start mixing in different circles. And the conversation's different when you start getting involved with people and projects and things that are outside your comfort zone.
So you touched a bit about medicine and so on. So I know that your days as a doctor are counted. So you decided to retire from medicine, which I am not surprised at all. Not only because you know how successful you are in your non-medical fields, but in general about how the climate around general practice is these days. What are your views on the future of our profession?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it?
Sorry, I had to ask you.
Well, I first noticed when I was a trainee as a GP registrar. I think I first noticed that every year the government kind of the problem there's several big problems, but the partnership model, which I believe supports general practice and primary care the way it is, and I think without it there'd be a big problem. After the Shipman inquiry, there's even documents in the reports where the Secretary of State for Health and the lady that led the Shipman inquiry, their finding was that the partnership model needed to stop. So they are actively, I believe, and I've heard it on good sources from those up in the ivory towers off the record, that they are actively trying to stop the partnership model in various ways, one of which is the formation of the PCNs, which they are trying to conglomerate practices in one locality into one network. Now that's a very strong power play, because if you can get them all into one network and then you can start to think about privatising them, they're much easier to snap up by people like Virgin Care and all the rest of it. So there's definitely an agenda out there about primary care. Add to that the spin that is given to the press. So the press report what the government wants us to hear. So I don't listen to any mainstream media anymore. I don't read any news because there is an agenda there, and we are only getting fed what we are wanted to look at. Go to a different country and you'll see it. Their opinion of what's happening in the UK is completely different to our opinion sitting in the UK, because they get different news, and it's just agenda driven. Now in this country you get the gutter press, GPs are lazy, doctors are on strike all the time, doctors are absolutely loaded, they're on 90 grand a year and they still want a pay rise. All this negative press, rather than saying, well actually, they're on less than they were 10 years ago, inflation's eroded their terms and conditions. They come out of all the negative stuff that we experience, they don't even report on. So there's an agenda certainly towards primary care. And then when you start thinking about the contracts, so I'm sure most of your listeners understand that the partnerships are like small businesses. They get an income from a contract, which is to the NHS, and out of that they pay their staff and their overheads, and what's left is the profit that they split between the partners. However, inflation has been, on average it's probably been 6% over the past 10 years, and the contract uplift every year has been about 1%. So each year there's been a 5% reduction in value of the contract that general practices have had to work with. But during that same time, the staff that work in the practices have been given NHS pay rises. So we have to pay our staff according to what the NHS tells us, and that's 3% one year, 2% the next, 5% the next, and then this latest one with the national minimum wage rising means that most of our staff will have a 10% pay rise. And then when you think about that, if you've got your lowest earners coming up to earn the same as your nurses or your healthcare assistants, well, the healthcare assistants will still want to earn a bit more than the receptionist, so they need to earn a little bit more, and then the staff above them, they need to earn more, because there's got to be a difference in pay between the different grades of staff according to experience. So everybody gets a pay rise, but there's less money to pay them, so it comes out of the practice margin, and there's less money for the partners who end up earning less than the salaried doctors or the locums that they're employing, and it just becomes, what's the point? And that has happened forever and ever that I can see, and if it carries on, It's only going to end one way. People think, well, what's the point? And it's being made to be that privatisation will be the most sensible outcome, and everybody will breathe a sigh of relief. When actually it's been a whole agenda that's been driven since the Shipman inquiry.
Yes, the future is very worrying for NHS and GPs, but I'm sure the future for corner plot properties looks much brighter. And I am sure, many people will be looking way out. So if someone would be interested, in either working with you, because there's opportunities for people not going fully themselves into property investing, but they can get involved with you, how they can reach out to you, how they contact you.
Yeah, there's going to be a few things coming up, actually, because as I leave medicine, I should have a little bit more time. So I may well take on one or two mentees. If somebody wants to actually learn how to do stuff, I might do that. But we have people that invest with us, so we use their money to grow our business, and our business only operates on very good margins, otherwise we don't do certain things. So people can invest money with us and get a good return, better than they would in an ISA or whatever. So they can do that. There's all sorts of things that people can get involved with. But if you want to find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Threadgold. If you want to find me on social media outside of LinkedIn, like Instagram is where I'm most active, and that's at Cornerplot Properties. And then if you're listening to this and want to see the other stuff that I do, I've got www.andrewthreadgold.com, and there's a contact us page on there as well.
Yeah, we'll put all those links on the show notes. Andrew, thank you for your time today, for sharing all the insights from your professional journey, and good luck with all your projects.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It's been lovely.